Alrighty, it is noon and we are recording. Hello and welcome back to Welty at Home, the slow reading virtual book club that alternates works by Eudora Welty with works by authors connected to Welty. Today we continue our series exploring two of Ross Macdonald's mystery novels. The last couple of weeks we read and discussed The Underground Man, and today we begin our discussion of Sleeping Beauty, where we will wrap up next Monday, June 29th. I'm Anna Trela, the Special Projects Coordinator at the Eudora Welty House and Garden, and we are grateful to Suzanne Mars, Eudora Welty's friend and biographer and Professor Emerita of Millsaps College, for guiding these discussions. First, some quick housekeeping. To comment or ask a question, click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and select Raise Hand. If you're on a tablet or a phone, you may have to tap the screen for this option to appear, and a lively discussion often takes place in the chat, so be sure to glance over at that chat box every now and then. I also collect the weekly chat transcript to send out with the newsletter at the end of our series, but if you would like access to the working document for reference, please reach out to me at info@eudoraweltyhouse.com. And with that, Suzanne, would you take it away with today's discussion?
All right, welcome to our discussion of Sleeping Beauty, which you've read a good bit about. And meanwhile, there are letters. And this was the novel that Ross Macdonald dedicated to Eudora Welty. And when it came out, the reviews were mixed. And this is I'm going to read from Tom's book and mine. Oh, let me just mention, we are again so fortunate to have with us Ross Macdonald's biographer, Tom Nolan. And I urge you to read his biography. Yeah. Okay, so here is what we wrote about the reviews when they first came out. Miller was enough of a scholar to know that critical blame often followed great praise, and he had been especially expecting a public backlash against the acclaim awarded Macdonald's previous book reviews, books by reviewers like Walter Clemens, Ray Sokoloff, and Eudora Welty. But the sardonic, even vituperative critiques of Sleeping Beauty shocked him, as did their being used as a forum to insult Ross and Eudora both. Crawford Woods in the New York Times Book Review indicated that Sleeping Beauty was written with an inflated self-regard that rendered the novel's prose nearly inedible. Anatole Broyard in the Daily Times found it difficult to see, as so many others apparently do, what sets Macdonald apart. An anonymous New Republic scribe mocked the way no less a figure than Eudora Welty had made deep-throated music about Macdonald on the front page of the New York Times Book Review. There were many positive and celebratory reviews, too, in Newsweek, for instance, and in the Los Angeles Times, the National Observer, the Chicago Tribune. And Miller would have the satisfaction of seeing his novel climb high in the bestseller charts of the very journals which had knocked it most. Number 9 in the New York Times, number 7 in Publishers Weekly, number 3 in Time. But the bad notices rankled, especially Crawford Woods, and most especially the ones that mocked Eudora's generous judgment. So there were the reviews. Now, Eudora herself thought the novel was outstanding, and she told Ken this when she read his typescript version of the novel. So before it had ever been reviewed, she had written to him to praise it. She said, "This has been a wider fling of the net you've caught together and shown they belong together, not only families, but powers, which are a family too. And that felt pattern is going to make all one, every component part connected." So she was really praising the structure of the novel, the interrelationship of the plots, and his taking on a wider thematic focus. She also discussed the use of light and shadow, the imagery, which she found very powerful. And she said, not the least of the book's real daring is your keeping Laurel from view and always in mind in her danger until the very last page.
Very clever.
Yeah, and then she says the story's realities, the novel's realities, and its images and symbols are one.
Yeah,
So there is plot as metaphor carrying the meaning of the novel. And she praises the use of birds, she says, which make us always aware of the vulnerable heart still alive in the world and in danger. She was also very pleased that in Laurel's room, Lou Archer finds a copy of a short story collection called Permanent Errors, which was by Reynolds Price and which had been dedicated to Eudora Welty. So uh, all of that is here. And also that, well, I'll talk about later about the title of the novel and what Ken had to say about that. But Tom, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the biographical origins of the novel, about Linda Miller, about the Santa Barbara oil spill.
sure. Well, to paraphrase Nabokov, looking for references to Linda Miller in Ross Macdonald's books, like looking to mentions of whales in Moby Dick. But I think you could also say that about glimpses of Margaret Millar, and even of Ken, I guess. But this is a book that he wrote just after Linda died, and he referred to it to a friend as the book that means the most to me. And Linda is virtually the foundation. This figure, Laurel, who represents Linda, if we may say, is the foundation of the whole book. And there are many, many descriptions of her, reactions to her, musings about her by her husband, her family members, and by Archer that could be, literal transcriptions of things people might well have said about Linda. Um, as far as the oil spill, it's very similar, of course, to the Santa Barbara oil spill that Ken and Maggie and everybody in Santa Barbara endured. Although he makes a point of saying that this is a different oil spill, and there's a reference to the Santa Barbara oil spill in the book to differentiate it. This oil spill takes place in near Pacific Point, which is south of Santa Teresa and LA. I think it's sort of represents La Jolla, San Diego area, which was where Raymond Chandler lived actually, and Dr. Seuss. They were neighbors. Uh, and Ken and Maggie were very involved in the protests and everything. I think someone told me that there's a scene in the book where someone lies down in front of a truck that's trying to get up onto the pier, which was this shaky old structure. And one of these huge trucks was getting up there to refuel or something necessary. And a fellow lies down in front of it. And the driver comes out and threatens him. I believe someone said that Ken actually did something like that. Ken was that guy. Anyway, they were prominent in the demonstrations and waving signs, and Ken would go out every day, on that pier, picket. When the president of Union Oil showed up, Ken and Maggie were right in the front. There's a picture in Sports Illustrated of Maggie right in the face of this Union Oil president. He's like, I mean, they were very prominently involved in the whole Get Oil Out movement. All of these protests led directly to the formation of Earth Day. And Ken actually went out. There's a thing also in this novel where a paranoid oil executive suggests, wildly that maybe the blowout was caused by somebody bombing the platform, some fanatics. But actually, it's not. But Ken and Al Stump and some other people who were in this writers group that gathered every few weeks at a Mexican restaurant, Santa Barbara. Al Stump told me that a bunch of them had service experience, Navy experience, and they actually talked about, why don't we go out one night and cause an explosion there, maybe blow up the platform. We have some background in munitions and so on. And they were going to do it, Al claimed, except they figured out that they learned that people were on the boats at night. There were guys on the boats there working or watching, and they could have been killed. So they decided, fortunately, not to do that. But Ken also was in a rowboat. A bunch of guys went out in a boat one day just to protest and try and interfere with things sort of like Greenpeace or something. Navy, Coast Guard was called and that sort of thing. So it was a very, very big deal for the city, the country, the whole ecological movement, and some of their lawsuits that they instituted or these groups instituted went on for years for whatever good it did. So this is another ecological catastrophe novel, apocalyptic sort of in tone, lots of imagery of the world turned upside down. This is an ecological crime. Ken and his friend Robert Easton wrote a piece for the New York Times Magazine, and Easton wrote a book about the oil spill, but they wrote a piece for the Times Magazine proposing an 11th commandment, thou shalt not despoil the earth. That was in 69. Well, in whatever year it was in the 21st century, Pope Francis gave a message and describing
We've lost you. Am I the only one who can't hear Tom?
No, I can't hear him. I think if he turns off his video, he'd probably have more bandwidth.
Tom, we've lost you, so I'll take over. Bill says if you turn off your video, you might have more bandwidth. I certainly never would have been able to say that myself. Thank you. Let me say another. So we've got these backgrounds. Another thing we want to think about is the title, Sleeping Beauty, which Ken told Eudora came to him from reading Henry Green. I think Eudora introduced him to Henry Green. It was validated for me by Henry Green's use of the phrase in party going, as though it was her part she had to play to evoke good times alone on the top of this ivory tower with his dreaming world beneath. So she's thinking of I think the Perrault version of Sleeping Beauty. So
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm sorry, it's my server. As I warned earlier, that happens sometimes. Yeah. You cut me off. I mean, I was interrupted in mid-flow. You want me to go on with something or remember where?
I think we have enough about it. I think I'm glad you brought up that business about Easton and Ken and the article in the New York Times. That was pretty interesting.
I linked to that article in the chat if you'd like to find it there.
Well, I was going to just say that the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty, the parents who finally are able to have a daughter and they invite all the good fairies to come to a big luncheon to celebrate the birth of the child, and there's a gold casket full of all sorts of wonderful things for each of the fairies, but there's one fairy that they have forgotten about who's been living alone in the top of a tower, and she comes, and there's no gold casket full of things for her, and so she curses the young daughter that she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel on the spindle and die. But one fairy has suspected this is going to happen, and so she says no, she'll just sleep for 100 years and be wakened by a handsome prince. I don't know if he said handsome prince, by a prince. Yeah. And in fact, that comes true. But in this version of the fairy tale, the prince's mother is not so keen on the young woman, and when the young woman becomes queen, and the king is out of town, she tries in various ways to kill the young woman and her children. Fails. The son comes home just in the nick of time before his evil mother is about to put these wife and children into a pit of vipers, and instead she jumps in and is killed. Now, Tom, is that a fair summary of what happened? Uh, so the sleep here's the myth of the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty, and Ken says, I meant the use of this term, Sleeping Beauty, as a generalized abstract noun. And I think what he's suggesting there is that beauty itself may be sleeping, it may be in danger, we may be in danger of losing it. Desolation may be at hand, but there's hope that beauty can be reawakened. The sleeping beauty can be reawakened, can be saved. So, uh, I'm Tom, did you want to say anything about that?
Oh, I think you're right. And in a way, he uses this novel to retrieve or celebrate, save the special nature of his daughter who died. And in fact, I hope this isn't a spoiler to people. Uh, the young woman doesn't die in this book. So, he uses a fairy tale to resurrect the Sleeping Beauty. I think maybe it's possible he thought about Miss Welty a little bit with that title, maybe.
Yep, I thought of that too, and I actually thought where might be a very specific reference to Eudora Welty when Archer praises the eyes of Elizabeth Somerville, and that sounds like a description of Eudora's eyes to me, in that. But yeah, there's also Tom Russo, who very much cast his wife in the kind of fairy tale
Yeah,
role. So
yeah.
there's all of this fairy
Yeah.
tale background. The
And he
cat,
makes it different. He writes a letter to her like she was the princess or the queen, and when he lay beside her when she was sleeping, he felt like a king.
yes, yeah,
Wanted to feel like a king again. And there are all kinds of fairy tale imagery and apocalyptic imagery, and people sort of dazed and standing around, sort of like in a coma throughout the book.
yeah. So we'll talk about that as we go through the novel. The ship, the Canaan Sound, Ken Miller was on a ship in World War II called the Shipley Bay, I think was the name of his ship, and there was a fire on that ship from of a leak, but it did not destroy the ship. So that, but there is that sort of basis. And then I know that Catherine Fries, who can't be with us today, would want me to mention that Elizabeth quotes Catullus on page
Oh, yes.
53, and I'll just read that briefly.
Odie.
Almost got it. Here we go. She's saying about the Lennoxes, Jack and Marion. Jack and Marion have had a troubled marriage, but all three of them really care about each other. I suppose it's what they call a love-hate relationship. Then I can't read Italian, but Odi
It's
amor
flat.
excelsior. I'm sure I mispronounced that horribly, but anyway, there is the quote uh, from Catullus, and Archer says, "What does that mean? I hate you and I love you, and it hurts." She translates it. So
That that
uh,
quote turns up in more than one Ross Macdonald novel. And Ken's old friend Don Pierce from college said he Ken used that personally about his marriage. Thought of his marriage that way.
yeah. Well, okay. Uh, so enough of this background chatter. Let's talk about the novel and get you all involved. And I thought we probably should start with Laurel, who is at the center of the novel. We only see her for the first 15 pages, for the first three chapters. Then
Uh,
she's gone. And
uh,
but but she's evoked and over and over again. So I thought we might talk first about seeing her in person and how you think uh, the novel handles that, and then let's talk about the search for her. She's the mystery that Archer is trying to solve, and what other people tell him about her, what he's able to get through his investigation. Okay, so we'll talk about Laurel. Harriet, did you have something?
I did. Oh, am I? Yeah, I'm not muted. I really wanted to say something about the background material.
Go
That
ahead.
is, it's Reynolds Price's Permanent Errors. Price says in the book's preface that the stories isolate the single incurable central error that the characters made in. While these errors are permanent, the process of diagnosing them and providing palliation is what allows the characters to carry on. Um, and I just wanted to connect that to Archer's work in this book as psychologist and potential healer. Reynolds and his permanent errors and the errors in this book. Um,
Right.
and then the other thing I wanted to say about background was when we were talking uh, about love and hate. You know that I just can't resist slashing onto the golden apples and love and hate being close together and opposites.
All
Uh,
the opposites on Earth. Yes.
yeah, and so a little bit from just didn't want to get too far from the background before saying those.
Hooray. And I'm really glad you brought up about Price. I don't know that I ever read that introduction to permanent errors, but I should have said when we were talking about these errors are the errors of the past that haunt her are permanent, but there is that hope for healing as Price says. Okay. Uh, okay, Jane.
You were asking about Laurel. The very first time that we see her, she is, to fit in with the fairy tale theme, she's the damsel in distress. And Archer doesn't know her. He doesn't know anything about her. He's a detective, yet she has not asked for his help, but he has sort of gone after her like a knight in shining armor, especially when he sees her, the young gentleman with the broad shoulders seemingly pursuing her.
Good.
Yes. So we see her in those first three chapters. First, he sees her on the beach with the bird, covered in the bird in oil. She's uh, holding the bird to her. Then he sees her on the cliffs where the tide is maybe coming in. And then he takes her with him to his apartment. And on the way to the car, they see that moment with the young man. There's that moment with the young man where he's protecting her. So he's for some reason he has seized upon this and he is playing the role of protector. Yeah. What else here? What else is going on with Laurel in these opening sections? Harriet? Oh, I'm not here. We're not hearing you, Harriet.
I'm thinking back to the review, um, and I just want to say how good this first chapter is, um, and um, and how we have Laurel, but we have these images like the um, the world stabbed by an oil rig and spilling black blood, um, or the enormous slick spreading like premature night across the sea, and the bird with orange red eyes that seem to be burning with anger, and a handsome young woman with dark eyes as angry as the birds, who says, uh, when Archer says the bird probably won't survive even if she tries to save it, she says, "No, but maybe I will." Um, Quite a bird. I'm getting to be one in self-defense. My family is in the oil business, I mean, I could go on with with oil in this chapter. But you want to talk about Laurel, so I'll say, later on, there's this comment about her being um, uh, empathetic to the point of psychosis, and there, which is one terrific line that I'm angling a little bit. But the chapter is so good on both oil, empathy. I want I'm tempted to go to the workers because I think that it's not only about oil, but also about social justice issues and class divisions but the portrait of the workers who are tired and disappointed, ready to take revenge on anything that moved, who the oilmen from the workboats went by struggling like remnants of the army, and a fisherman gave them an ironic salute. They turned pitying looks as if he was a madman who didn't understand important. They think water is the nuisance because they can't sell it for $2 or $3 a barrel, and all they care about is the oil they're losing. They don't give a damn about the things that live in the sea or the people that live in the town. So I'm just connecting all of that to Laurel
Well,
and to.
I think that's really important because it's right from the start, Laurel is connected to the ecological issue
Mhm.
and to the class issue because her family is privileged. Uh, they've exploited the environment, and these other people, the fishermen, the workers,
Yeah.
and so that the if the why the spill takes place is one mystery, and he tries to suggest why that's happened. Another mystery is why is Laurel like this? And then there's that bird imagery which is linked to Laurel, so that she and the grebe are sort of equated, and the beauty of the birds, the hope associated with the birds rising up. Um, or not being able to, and the devastation of that, all linked to Laurel. So I think that right from the first chapter, he's integrated all of these central concerns. It's pretty powerful, yeah. Joe Ellen, and then Pearl.
Laurel, right from the start, um, holds the bird close, wants to take it home, and we're told a little later that she holds the damaged grebe as if it were her child. So we have a kind of mother-child relationship here, and she's certainly connected to the bird. When Archer is walking south to seek her out, he sees a white object, and Laurel is sort of shrinking back, pretending to be an accidental object caught in a crevice, almost like a bird caught in the with the oil. But one of the oil rig workers nails a situation right away. We already know enough to know there's something wrong with the family, Laurel's oil family. But he says there's something wrong with the oil platform, something wrong with the structures down there. And we'll learn more and more about the structures, the social structures of the family too.
Yeah, so it's like it's drilling into a piece of cake. This
Mhm.
is not a good situation. Pearl.
I wanted to thank you for talking about not just the fairy tale, but beyond the fairy tale, the whole metaphoric and symbolic idea of sleeping and of beauty. Those two things go throughout. I found the fairy tale elements much less prominent than when we read Welty, let's say The Robber Bridegroom, where it just pops out all the time. We have all that folklore and so on and so forth. But I can see more of it now. For Laurel, and I was going to talk about that grebe as a child image. And also, if you don't know what a grebe is or you look it up, then you're just thinking grieve, almost like Joe Ellen almost made that mistake. So you've got level of I don't know, suggestion that is there. I'm just absolutely thrilled with the beauty and complexity of Miller's writing and how complex Archer is. And so thinking about Sleeping Beauty, he's always noticing how beautiful the women are, their eyes, their legs, the shape of their body. And so he's always questioning the sleeping desires within himself and his own past and his own history. And that, weaves throughout. And then I just wanted to read this one passage describing Laurel from Lou Archer's point of view on 23. I asked myself as I drove across Westwood where my concern for his wife originated. The answer wasn't clear. And this is another part of the mystery. Like, why does he follow her? Why does he want to save her? Why does he take her up to the room and have to explain all the time how she got the pills from his apartment? What were they doing there? It says the answer wasn't clear. She seemed to be one of those people to whom you attached your floating fears, your unexamined sorrows. And so the depth of Archer himself, wandering, going, driving, all this place. I don't know that terrain myself. I grew up next to the Hudson River at the foot of the Catskill Mountains. And so reading about the San Francisco landscape also just made me feel like the first time I came to the South and had to read all of this Southern landscape. I thought, I wondered what Welty thought about that. She had been to San Francisco. She knew some of that.
This is Santa Barbara.
Santa Barbara, sorry.
Yeah.
And, whether she knew that landscape or not. And if she thought about, we got a little hint of this when we read the letters, how she was fascinated with what he knew about birds and how the birds played in. And then she, of course, always was using some birds too, but much less about specific species. But so maybe the birds to Kenneth Miller were like Welty's flowers and the flora that she's always very specific about. Okay, yeah. That's a lot of things. I'll be quiet now.
Oh, good. Thank you, Prof. I think we've got Jane and Hope and Harriet.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate what Jo Ellen said about that quote. That's what I was going to bring up, but she mentioned it, that inadequate casing, there's something the matter with the structures, they're all broken up. And she mentioned that there's something wrong with the family. It's yes, with the family, but especially with the girl. I can't think of her name now. The girl who's they mentioned that she had some psychological problems. I think the sister, Tom's sister, was talking to Lou Archer about something that must have happened to her when she was young. Something very Freudian about this, about her behavior.
Yeah, we'll come to that, okay? Good. Thank you, Jane. Hope, and then Harriet. We'll come back. Hope.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the few millennials in book club. I'm really enjoying these books, and so I just wanted to say that up front. I don't think it's ever a novel I would have picked up for myself, but kind of to piggyback off of what Eudora Welty was saying about the imagery in the book, and we've touched on a couple of things, but I noticed immediately, especially since in the last one we read, we talked about color a lot and how vivid it was and all the different blues and greens and the color of the fire. I noticed immediately in this one, there's a lot of references just to the color white and all the different ways when it gets mentioned, how it gets sullied somehow or how it changes. So the first one I noticed is I think the second page of the book where it says the gulls were like white plastic, which is there's so many other things that can be white in the sky, like a wisp of a cloud. But he chooses plastic. So this idea of pollution is already very prevalent. And then Laurel is referenced as the woman in the white shirt, and how that immediately gets oil all over it because of the bird she's holding. And then Blanche's seafoods, Blanche is another word for white, and how her business is being impacted by the oil spill. Archer says that the fish, he can't finish it because it tastes of oil. And then how the captain is described as clean as driven snow. And his reputation is being actively sullied by his response to this problem. And then Elizabeth, when she goes to leave with Archer the first time, she puts on a tourmaline mink coat, which is a specific white mink coat. And then Archer gives her a look, and so she changes to a black coat. which, so like for me, all of these different ways in which white is shifting to either something darker, or it's polluted, or it's sullied in some way. I just thought that was really striking, and it's definitely a more subtle through line of just like the different ways that an oil spill like this can corrupt everything. I think a lot of us probably remember the BP oil spill. So like, I think this in particular is also pretty close to home for the Southerners as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that imagery that Macdonald is building in here, that complements the development of the plot, the themes of the novel. Harriet.
I was going to say that Laurel is not only holding the greb as a child, she's also the question is whether she is like the greb uh, damaged beyond repair. We are looking at her capacity for empathy um, and her um, and her psychosis. But we're also looking at her to switch from her positive attributes, um, her mood change with Archer when she takes him up to the apartment and she is picking a fight. I can't help but thinking that we're looking at parent-adolescent agony, the kind of thing that that Ken must have known about from dealing with Linda. That Archer says, "You want to pick a fight with somebody? Why does it have to be me?" I'm thinking about that stage of parent-child relationships where you try to help, a parent tries to help, and the child is picking a fight. It's a stage that is about independence and self-determination, but it also here is potentially self-destructive, and it is also something we see in Jack, that her father is when you offer him help, he picks a fight. And there's this pattern of relationship between father and daughter that we're exploring.
Yeah. And of course, there's also the change when she takes the barbiturates and notices a difference in her from the drugs. And that's why he's so worried about suicide and so questioning everyone about suicide. Yeah. Joe Ellen.
If you could unmute for us, Joellen.
I just want to add that Harriet spoke about the father-daughter relationship. And in fact, somewhere, I think it's when Jack is driving so dangerously, taking the money, the Archer mentions a wildness in Laurel, which is like her father's, can be dangerous and unpredictable. And also, when we first meet Laurel, she's hoping the tide takes her out. That's in her first conversation with Archer. And she meets her eventual husband, Tom, over sleeping pills. He's a pharmacist and sleep. Somebody says, I don't remember who, I'd like to sleep and not wake up. But it could be two or three people that I can think of. So that really all fits in this sleeping beauty business, the wildness of some character, and the damage that it causes.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, I wanted to look at a few passages just that I thought were important about Laurel after she disappears. And the first is what Joyce is talking about her on page 36. Just want to call your attention to these passages. And Joyce says, he says, "What was the matter with her nerves?" Archer asked. And Joyce says, "She said it made her nervous living in that house. She said it gave her nightmares." This is Tom's house. Then Laurel's grandmother, Sylvia, says on page 71, "He got on her nerves." That's Rousseau. "He got on her nerves, she told me. She couldn't bear to live in such intimacy especially in that dreary little house. I would have been glad to help them buy another house, but her husband wouldn't appear of it. He's very much attached to that awful house of his. Apparently, he's lived in it all his life. And then one more on page 74 in the letter that Tom sends her. And he says to her about the house it's on 75. If you can't live in this house, all right, we'll move into an apartment or buy wherever you say. We do not have to go on living in LA if you do not want to. So over and over again, it's the house. And here is that sort of Gothic house, the house which represents the past.
Yeah,
and
very much so.
Yeah. And so I don't want to give the plot away, but I'm just struck with how carefully he's setting this up for us. Yeah, Tom, did you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, I don't want to give anything away either, but I'm also thinking it's heartening that everyone is giving so much close and generous and conscientious and perceptive treatment to the writing. And I'll just say it's absurd and unbelievable that those reviewers could claim that there was nothing graceful or worthwhile in this book. It's a wonderful book, and it just makes you mad all the more.
Joe Ellen and then Harriet.
Oh, I thought Harriet was going to be first. I was kind of
We'll go
daydreaming.
with Harriet.
Yeah, go ahead. But
Harriet.
Yeah, well, the house doesn't just give her nightmares; it gives Tom nightmares too. And we've seen this house before. I mean, we've seen the idea of the Gothic house in Underground Man as the Broadhurst house, but this is I'm thinking from this episode of Tom's nightmare to the moment in Underground Man where there's a dream episode, waking up and being confused, confusing murders. I can't remember the character's name. The girl, the blonde girl, the sister.
Tom's cousin Gloria.
No, I'm talking about an Underground Man.
Oh, an Underground Man. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah. So I'm just I mean, he's so good at this. That is, he's so good at evoking the psychology of the past. Just a couple of lines wandering around. I didn't mean to dye her, but the back of her head was. This is in his dream, not necessarily in reality. She wouldn't let me get in bed with them. She said I had to stay in the room with the little girl. We wondered what little girl. I couldn't wake up. I couldn't wake her up even by singing. What did you sing? Jingle bells. The bed made a noise like jingle bells. She called she called him that sometimes, and they laughed. And then Tom sat on the bed with his legs dangling like a man who had been invalided in combat with nightmares. Just terrific stuff as he evokes this nightmare that is connected to the house.
Right. Yeah. The house is a symbol of his past, and Laurel is disturbed by that past, and why we'll find out. Joe Ellen.
Linking to the houses, again, as an Underground Man, there are so many houses that we get enough detail about to really distinguish them and associate them with their characters. But I also wanted to mention one more time when Tom was asleep that he is confused, talking about his mother's death. And that is in this section, that he thinks he pushed her down the stairs. I can't remember, maybe it's Gloria who tells us later, no, she was shot. So that's something that's left hanging by the time we're halfway through the novel. But Tom can't wake up. Maybe he's on sleeping pills as well. But so anyway, That's the house they're living in.
So we do find out that the mother has been murdered in this house, in this part of the novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, shot at least. Yeah.
These are haunted houses.
Yes.
Pearl.
Uses the houses also to continue to make all these class distinctions, not just where they are, in case, as I said, I don't know the geography, but all the descriptions of them. So even on Ralph, when he goes to Ralph Mungan's house on page 89, lived in a handsome Spanish house dating from pre-war days. The lawn in front was green and smooth. So he's always trying to use every piece of the mystery and every person of the mystery to make it more complicated and to point out all these differences. Not just, it's a family saga, as we've sort of suggested, but all these different class differences. And I don't know what edition you're reading from, but I have an early edition that still has the book cover, where you see this more Ophelia-like, but she's face down. But the comments on the back, which are obviously from previous reviews, because this would have been, before it got those other reviews, but in the New York Times book review, Anthony Butcher is saying, without in the least abating my admiration for Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, I would like to venture the heretical suggestion that Ross Macdonald is a better novelist than either of them. So those later reviews that don't like Sleeping Beauty, they were in definite contrast to the earlier reviews. Great
Yeah.
praise.
I would take Miss Welty's literary judgment over Anatole Broyard's.
I always take her judgment seriously. Should we talk about Archer interviews character after character about Laurel. And so he talks to Joyce, Hampshire, to Jack and Marion Lennox, to Ben and Elizabeth Somerville, to Sylvia Lennox, to William Lennox, and to Connie Hapgood. And are those different perspectives on Laurel significant to you in these interviews? And how do they affect you in terms of the playing out of the novel? Jacob.
I'm glad that before this I had the time to read in full The Writer as Detective Hero, and I was kind of copying and pasting the paragraphs I liked. And I find a paragraph towards the end of that essay, I think, really gets at what you're expressing. Miller says, when he's trying to describe his relationship with Archer and his relationship with the detective novel, he says something like, Archer is a hero who sometimes verges on being an anti-hero. And while he is a man of action, his actions are largely directed at putting together the stories of other people's lives and discovering their significance. He is less a doer than a questioner, a consciousness in which the meanings of other lives emerge. This is I find a very valuable distinction, an accurate one, that separates Macdonald from, say, Chandler and Hammett. Chandler and Hammett are 99.9% style. Chandler wasn't interested in the plot. To be honest, I don't think he was very interested in other people. He was interested in the repartee, the sort of bouncing back and forth, and how quickly his hero could talk down to everybody and be funnier than them. This is much more invested in people. He is so, there's another good passage in the essay when he identifies his interest in humaneness. I mean, I think these are very like a humanist writer. He wants to know, how do people tick? What happened to them? How can you comfort them? It is a series of interviews. Archer almost disappears off the page at times. It's just his voice, and it's a constant stream of questions. And all the while, he's sort of threading to the sort of emotional background for all these characters. I just found that was like exactly what the book is doing, is chasing the plot to what happened to these people and how to sort of comfort them.
Thank you. Yeah, great, Jacob. Thank you. And thank you for linking it to that essay. Harriet.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that Archer is less a detective in the traditional sense and more of a psychologist who is investigating, and often with the language of of therapy and of urging people towards therapy. But um, he's also filled with a sense of responsibility. And and I'm thinking about both his sense of having somehow been responsible for Ronnie's disappearance, and now responsible for Laura's uh, uh,
Well,
danger, Laurel's
uh,
danger with the drugs that he's taken from his house, and that sense, which is often what he doesn't find in. I'm thinking about the therapist who asks questions, doesn't give answers, listens to the answers that you provide, um, and I'm thinking about the sense of denial of responsibility. So many of the conversations with the Lennox family, who say when they're talking about the oil rig, for example, saying it was an act of God, that there is that the issue of listening, standing, uh, and of trying to find the permanent error in people that explains them in order to be palliative, in order to create healing.
Archer also psychoanalyzes himself. You know,
Mhm.
I'm trying to be sure I'm not a middle-aged man on the make, he says, So, and then he
Yeah,
has
himself as that, yeah.
that dream. He wakes up and says, I dreamed I was sleeping. He's just slept with Elizabeth,
And
and
he
he
dreams
wakes
sleeping
up
with the
and
world.
dreams he was sleeping with Laurel. And so, what kind of man am I? And so he's always psychoanalyzing himself as well as
Right.
psychoanalyzing other people. Joe Ellen.
Um, sorry, it just crossed my mind. Elizabeth Somerville, with whom Archer sleeps, had been associated with Welty by her blue eyes. Just just a thought. But because we're getting so close to the end, we have to talk about Connie Hapgood
Oh,
because
good. So
and
glad.
we meet her in dead center of the novel. I'm on record as saying I think it's that dead center in a lot of novels, most of them maybe, are very important positions. And Connie is going to be the second wife of William Lennox, Laurel's grandfather, and she's absolutely a realist. She's not living in any fantasy world, even though the entry of the house she lives in looks like a medieval castle with all of its oak wood beams and things. She's managing her husband, who we're told lives in his dreams a lot of the time. But she's the one who also knows she'd been a teacher, and she identifies Harold Sherry for us, the young man in the black turtleneck that comes up early along the beach. And she tells, oh, and Mrs. Sherry, so sends him to the next place, the next person to interview. And she recognizes she's the woman who's going to be a wife, but recognizes so many married women's illusions. What she says about Mrs. Sherry is that she thought she'd be taken care of for the rest of her life. But then the illusion of marriage breaks down. But the crack that Archer makes, I think it's at the end of this chapter. Oh no, I don't have it right here. But he says that Connie, she's her husband's been upset. She pushes the hat down on his head and makes him laugh, and he sees how she's managing her own marriage. She's taking care of him now, so she'll be taken care of by his money for the rest of her life. She's very different from most of the other wives and women that we meet. Another second wife.
Let me just say I'm not too crazy about Connie myself because I think her assessment of Laurel is pretty uh, mm, it's unsympathetic, shall we say. And, she's right. Laurel has problems, but she's the only one that Archer interviews, I think, who doesn't see some virtue in Laurel, some uh, uh, quality that is worth saving. And Connie's pretty dismissive of her. Uh,
She's the one, Suzanne, I'm sorry, but who tells us about the Las Vegas escapade,
the,
probably being Laurel's idea, but Harold taking the rap for it, which is very similar to Linda Miller's escapade, right?
Tom, well,
Oh,
Linda,
well,
I
yeah,
don't
that's
think
interesting. She disappeared and was found in Reno. Uh, I don't know that you can't exactly blame Linda. She took off with these guys. They said they were going to bring her back to college before the curfew, but they didn't. So she tried to get other people to take her back and sort of went into this fugue state where that just went on for days. But anyway, I don't know. But it's interesting that the fiction and the real life have an episode take place in that area.
but to what degree Laurel is responsible or what degree Linda is responsible is ambiguous. And
Mhm.
she says she's has a schizoid personality. She's pretty absolute. We know that from someone's coming. Sorry, I was
Linda was sort of diagnosed as schizophrenic.
Linda was.
I think so, yeah. Teen years, latent anyway.
So I do think that I don't. I mean, I just had the feeling Joyce Hapgood was being kind of from the time from the time Laurel was in high school, judgmental, perhaps
Mm.
the realist, but perhaps not the most sympathetic of characters to me. But I'll defer to you all, Harriet.
I was going to say that yeah, I want to both underline what Joellen was saying about marriage. That, I think that in the way that Underground Man is often about mother-child relationships, where I was talking about Mare Fatales last time. This novel is interested in marriages and what goes wrong in them. But they're also but I also think about Connie as the trad fatale. She was a nice looking woman. Her waist, cinched by a wide western belt, looked as if it could span my two hands. I could span it with my two hands. Her dark eyes looked at me as if it might be a dangerous try. And later, she gave me a flashing smile like a knife gleaming briefly from concealment. Connie is the traditional femme fatale here, and she says that she's going to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, but she's certainly sharp and dangerous in her interactions with Archer.
Nice.
Oh, and then Joe Ellen.
Oh, I was going to say on the subject of Archer, and I can't find the quote, but it's toward the middle of the book, maybe chapter 20 or 21, where somebody says, "You're asking a lot of questions," and he says,
Yeah.
I'd rather ask them than answer them. And just a few pages later, 122, he's given the same question that he had used before. You mean you can't or you won't? And he's already used that against somebody else, and now someone's asking him. So he's so much a character of it, even if he isn't on the page, as Jacob pointed out.
Right. And Joe Ellen.
I want to support Suzanne's reservations, actually. I was thinking of Connie as more crucial to moving the novel along with important information. But Lou Archer pushes back on her when she says, I've known Laurel since she was 11 or 12. She's always lived in a world of her own, not very happy world where not very nice things happen. Archer says, that's true of a lot of children. Ordinarily, though, we don't blame them. And then she says, I'm not blaming her, for heaven's sake. I'm trying to inject a little realism into this situation. It would be a poor bargain for all of us if Laurel picked up a little money or a little loving at the expense of breaking her grandfather's heart. And Archer says, I mean that, or she says, I mean that literally. Archer's response, he thinks of the powerful reasons the woman had for keeping him alive. So kind of.
Thank you, Joel, and we're on the same page. Anything, we're out of time, actually. Harriet, did you have one? You want the last word? Nope.
I saw Tom wave his hand.
Vanderbilt.
Maybe we could give Tom the last word.
Okay, let's give Tom the last word. Good.
Thank you, thank you. I just like when, as you said, the fellow says, "Look, I'm telling you my family secrets."
Oh, yeah.
Archer says, "Tell more." And another part where the guy says, well, or so the woman says, "Well, you're not interested in hearing about our family problems." He says, "Oh, but I am." Anyway, so
So yeah, Archer as detective hero. Yeah, the writer as detective hero. Here we go. All right, I'll turn it over to you, Anne.
Alrighty. So that's the end of today's discussion. We will wrap up with our final discussion, concluding the novel and our talk about both of Ross Macdonald's novels next Monday, June 29th at noon. See you guys then.
See you then.